Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I wanted to go over behaviors that avoidants tend to think are toxic or unhealthy, and they feel like are worth breaking up over, especially repeatedly. I'm not saying these things are necessarily accurate. Some of them might be unhealthy, but it doesn't mean that the relationship is doomed or there's something wrong with the relationship. Some of these behaviors are common behaviors that people don't realize can create issues within the relationship, but avoidants are particularly uncomfortable with these behaviors because it makes them feel that there's something wrong with the relationship, and that's why they tend to break up over these things, usually if it's repeated, because they feel that if they leave these things, it'll fester and make the relationship even worse, and that means that they are a failure, they picked the wrong partner, etc. And so that's why a lot of them, these things trigger them to want to break up or see if maybe there's something like a negotiation. And usually in their version of negotiation, they want you to change. They'll probably change something very little. And maybe eventually it'll be a more equal negotiation or adjustment. But usually what happens with these behaviors is they kind of dig their heels in because they're really afraid of what these behaviors can do to the relationship. It's their internal fears, actually. And it's actually a lot of their source of testing. This is what they believe ends relationships, is maybe even a better way to put it. Some of this might be triggering. And if anyone's curious about avoidant tests, I have videos on that. These are just internal beliefs. I'm not saying that this is healthy or right. Some of them might be. A lot of them are not too bad, but it's just the extreme version of where it comes from. That's kind of what we're going to talk about. Also, I want to let you know tomorrow I'm flying out for the holidays. And so I'm quite busy. So if I'm a little bit all over the place, it's probably because my mind is all over the place. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the behaviors that avoidants think ends relationships. The first one is if anybody has a constant need for rehashing conversations or disagreements. Avoidants believe sometimes that leaving things alone for just a little bit can actually benefit the relationship in the long run. And that is true to some extent, but that doesn't mean avoiding things completely. And some avoidants take this too far, where they almost put things under the rug. And so usually if this is the case, you want to find a balance between you guys, which means that, as I was mentioning in the beginning, you might actually want to give in a little bit. I know it sounds bad, but I'm just telling you that usually this is what happens. Give in a little bit and not necessarily continuously rehash those disagreements and conversations, but bring up that this is a preference that you want to bring these up eventually or in a couple weeks, a couple months, and that you want to find some solution to this issue. And so it helps them to actually get that space they need. But you're not saying, hey, I'm never going to bring this up again, because that's not healthy. Some of them might want you to never bring it up again, but that will not create health in the relationship. It's going to create more issues, and that's going to actually fester. And so kind of meeting in the middle, that's a really good one. We can talk about this in a couple weeks or when we feel a little bit better, but I want to find at least some solution, even if it's just temporary. Okay. So it's the first one. The next one is constantly pushing someone to change their mind. This is very triggering for avoidants. Avoidants do not like when somebody pressures them to do something that the other person feels is beneficial to either them, the relationship, or whoever. Avoidants feel like that takes away their independence. It also makes them feel like they're not appreciated for who they are, and they feel really controlled. So for example, if an avoidant says, I don't really think we should, considering this is near Christmas time, let's use an example of that. I don't really think that we should meet each other's families on the holidays. I think we should go our separate ways and maybe, do something later, that the next year or something with our holidays, with our families, but I don't think we should do holidays together. Maybe that's their thing. And you're saying, no, we should hang out in the holidays. Most relationships do that. It's not healthy. We've been together for 2 years. We should do something like that. And they're just like, no, I still think it's too quick for me. This is the way I am. The more you push me, it's not going to work. I'll consider it later, but right now I really don't want to. And you keep trying to push and change their mind. It's only going to push them away. Give them a little bit of time. Hear them out. That doesn't mean ignore it completely, but it means kind of find both a middle ground, even if it means looking at it another time. Because a lot of people don't understand this particular point. In general, when avoidants say no to something, a lot of times they are speaking from a trigger and an emotion. They don't realize it, but that's true. And very commonly, as the relationship progresses, they trust you more, so that answer actually can change. I'm not saying that you have to wait for years and years and years. But I'm also not saying that just because an avoidant says something, it doesn't mean that they are the all-seeing, they know everything. That's not, they're humans too. If they say, I don't want this right now, it doesn't mean it's forever. Avoidants especially change their mind more often because their original barrier is a trust issue. So if they start trusting you, they're going to be more open to these things. That's why a lot of times avoidants, if you see them healing or getting more comfortable, and some of you guys are in relationships where at first they said they wouldn't do something and then later they actually start doing it. It's a really common pattern, so just keep that in mind. The next one is if you have a constant need for attention. Usually avoidants find this to be a sign that maybe you need to heal yourself, but a lot of them also feel like if they can't give you what you need, you might look elsewhere. So just keep that in mind. Every person is different. What you perceive as a need for attention, you perceive as normal, they might feel like it's a need for attention. So have a conversation if you need to understand if they perceive you that way. Because a lot of times avoidants will call you needy. Now, avoidants don't call everybody needy. It just is who they perceive as needy. I'm in a relationship. He's never called me needy. I guess probably because I'm more avoidant than he is. I used to be, but I never perceived him as needy either. That word and constant needing attention has never been brought up in our relationship. I've never seen him that way. He's never seen me that way from what he's told me. And so I think that if an avoidant is saying that this is an issue, maybe ask them to clarify so that you guys can adjust your perspectives, right? Not every relationship, the avoidant is always calling the other person needy. That's not always the case. The next one is a belief where one partner believes they feel or know what the other person is feeling. I see this a lot in couples therapy, and it's more common it's more common with the non-avoidant partner because avoidants do struggle with knowing how they feel, and so the non-avoidant partner is kind of trying to help them. But it actually stunts their growth because it makes them not feel like they're autonomous, and they might dig their heels against you. So if an avoidant says, no, my childhood was fine, you might want to say, that's not true, your dad was really harsh. You might say, I appreciate you sharing that. I actually always felt like your dad was kind of harsh. Do you feel like that's true? Do you feel like maybe that was good for you? What's your perspective? Because I feel like if I was in that place, I wouldn't appreciate it. Something along those lines to navigate it. The next one is inability to take relationships slow. Avoidants tend to really struggle with being in a relationship where it's moving at a very progressive pace from their perspective. Actually, avoidants have relationships that move incredibly slowly. So for you, what's normal is probably what most people think is normal, especially even secure folks. But avoidants might think it's a little bit fast. I'm going to give an example, and I see this a lot. This one is an example which is a little faster, but let's just say, because right now is the holidays, and some couples, they've only been together for like 6 months, 8 months, and they're seeing their families, like each other's families. Some couples think that's normal, a normal pace. Most avoidant relationships are not going to do that. That's just too fast for them. Now, avoidants who are a little bit slower in their healing journey, they might be okay to do that, but then what happens is they might pull away because they start realizing, wait a second, I feel pressured. That was too fast. I wish I never did that. And so you might see that happen where they are okay with it and then they pull away. It's actually a little bit better for avoidants to take things slower because they tend to not break up or pull away nearly as often. So those are some of the ways that avoidants can kind of understand from their perspective what they think is toxic, and you can understand why they think these are worth breaking up over. So I'm going to summarize and then we'll wrap it up. Constant need for rehashing conversations, constantly pushing the other person to change their mind, a constant need for attention, believing you know what the other person feels and what maybe their perspective of their life, and then inability to take relationships slow. I hope this video was helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.